Writing Out Loud, a program designed to explore in-depth interviews with writers to hear that words have voices.
Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. My very special guest today is actress, humanitarian Mia Farrow. Welcome.
A pleasure to be here, thank you.
We're going to be talking about your memoir, What Falls Away, but we also want to learn about your career and all sorts of things in your activism today. I've got to confess, I confessed earlier, I was a huge fan of Peyton Place.
That's so sweet. I think of it as so long ago that you look far too young to have ever seen Peyton Place.
You should go into politics. But seriously, when you signed on for the role of Allison McKenzie, did you have any idea the series would be so successful?
In fact, I was certain that it wouldn't.
Seriously?
I thought it would be run for a short time. And I had done my first movie, I had done my screen test for Peyton Place, and it was called a pilot. And I was sure it wouldn't sell. And I did my first movie called Guns at Batasi in England, and I received an offer for another movie. So I called up the studio naively and I said, you know, I'm sure Peyton Place won't sell, but this is going to be a really good movie that I've been offered. Can I do the movie? And they said, absolutely not. You have to come to California. We're going to be shooting this series. And I was like, oh, that's not what I want to be doing at all. But then it was fun. You get into the routine. It was like school. I mean, I'd only been out of high school a year and a half, so it was, you know, and I had all those great people to work with and learn from.
And you and your co-stars became literally overnight celebrities. You made headlines when you cut your hair.
That was insane. You know, I to this day, I don't get that. Then I thought, well, slow news day. And now in the context of hair history, if we're to go to that place, I see perhaps it was, it followed a time when women wore a lot of big hair and spent a lot of time creating this big hair. Now, I had had very long hair, which had received a lot of comment at the time because it was the days of, you'll know these words, flips and bubbles, right?
Yes.
And the studio wanted, they gave me an option, flip or bubble. And I went to the line on that one. I had the waist length hair because my secret motive, though I pleaded, you know, it was to do with the character. But my secret motive was that I had just bought a horse and I wanted to ride that horse in the morning before work. And I knew that if it was one of those hairdos, it would take forever. I also suspected I wouldn't look good in a flip or a bubble. So I fought that one and I won and I got the long hair. Then when I cut it off, it was after I had seen Member of the Wedding.
Oh, I love that.
And I had, as I said, I had finished high school and it was a very intense Catholic upbringing. And I'd been in boarding school in England, a convent school, and I felt I was getting too much mail about my hair in praise of my long hair. And so I thought, it has to go. I'm getting vain, or I'm in jeopardy. I'm in danger of becoming vain about my hair. And that was the reason I cut it. But I knew it would be okay because I had just seen Julie Harris in Member of the Wedding. I thought, well, she looks just great. You know, so I thought, I'll look just fine with no hair.
Well, and you did. And you did.
Anyway, it was no hair. And it was, you know, 1/2 inch long. I cut it myself.
How tricky has it been for you, for your family, living in the public eye?
I never thought, except for certain periods in my life when there was a lot of focus on me, I never felt we were living in the public eye. Even in Beverly Hills, which was, in those days, everything was slower. And you've read my books, you know, about the tour buses would go up and down our street, which was Beverly Drive. We would enact little vignettes for them, you know, just for the drama. But I never felt our actual lives were being invaded. It is true that when I went with Frank Sinatra, in those days, there was an attempt to invade our lives. But that wasn't our lives. It was a factor on the peripheral, which sometimes made us make certain accommodations. We wouldn't go certain places, or we would leave certain ways, and he was always strategizing on how to avoid them. Other people might have let it go. You know, Paul Newman at the same time would just come out of a restaurant with his wife Joanna, their arms around each other, and they would smile for 5-10 minutes, and then they would go home. But, you know, for Frank Sinatra, he was offended at the chase and, you know, and took it on as he took on all things. So it was a factor in that sense. But back to your original question, it didn't really affect our inner lives or mine in the ways that we connected in the important thoughts or decisions, or, you know, and then there was sometimes, there would be a lot of press where you just sort of stay in and wait for that wave to crash and wait for that static to go out of listen, who am I, the Queen of England, out of my life, so that, you know, I could feel that calm again. It's usually a 3-day static, which can be I use the word static because it's the most sort of visual image I can give to describe that kind of, you know, mayhem around you, which you need to get rid of to go back to your peaceful self.
Your mother, actress Maureen O'Sullivan, what's your favorite movie memory of her?
Which movie did I love best?
Mm-hmm.
I loved her when she was really, well, I mean, I loved her always, but before I was born, the movie she made before I was born completely fascinated me. The Barretts of Wimpole Street,
Yes.
David Copperfield, Anna Karenina, the Tarzan movies. You know, I mean, she had something so innocent and joyous and witty, and she was enchanting.
And your father?
My father was, as you've read the books, you know, a conflicted, very complicated character. He was a Catholic convert, which is intense. And he took it on in a way that I've never seen anyone take it on. You know, the philosophical debates throughout the night with Jesuits, you know, the best debaters around. And he wrote these books on Catholicism, a history of the papacy, a story of Thomas More. The very required reading when I was in high school, this book on Damien the leper, Damien of Molokai. That was his book. So he was, on his grave, my mother had put sailor and poet, because he was never far from the sea. And he also wrote a lot of poetry, which people don't much know. But he had those were, you know, very much a part of him, his love of the sea, his need to be in the sea and around the sea, and the poetry of his heart, and how he would read me John Donne, and you know, he was a philosopher, but he was also a womanizer, and you know, he had, you know, an extremely witty and brilliant man who, despite the guidelines of the Catholic Church, he never found real peace. You know, I don't know how he could have put his life in order, and died at 57. I'm sure he would have lived a lot longer if they'd had today's meds, you know, Lipitor or whatever.
Exactly. To what extent are you John Farrow's daughter?
I think to every extent. I'm both of their children, for sure. And I'm really proud of those parts of me, you know. I have my mother's resilience, her motto of push on, me. We just push through it. Even, you know, through terrible griefs that she went through. She was one for pushing on and sustaining all of us children. Even after my father's death, when things were hard and she wasn't used to having to take care of herself, suddenly she had to, and she did. You know, she went on Broadway. She did a Broadway show. She supported the 6 remaining children. My brother had died, so that her life was tinged with sorrow. But she did all these things, and so I like to feel, you know, I definitely have that staunch thing that I can do it, and I hope I have her wit. I hope I have her humor, and I hope I have, you know, they shared a lot of things, but among those things that my father had was, you know, the philosophical bent, to look at things from many angles, probably too many, you know, a more complicated, a more melancholy side. I mean, who listens to Gregorian chants for fun? Kind of I do. That's from my father. The John Donne from my father. The love of books and reading from my father. He always hoped, you know, that I would be a writer.
And you are, and a wonderful writer. I was talking with you about that earlier. When did you know you were ready to write your memoir?
You know, it came out of necessity at a time when I was going through a really awful time, and I was resolved, for right or wrong, not to speak publicly about the things that were happening around me, and there were plenty of people speaking, you know, lies and horrible things. But I took sort of, I thought of Jacqueline Onassis Kennedy, or Kennedy Onassis. I thought of her silence, and I thought of the dignity of that silence. And I thought, I don't want to get in a boxing ring with anyone. I'll write. And, you know, and I did throughout that time. So the book is a product of, you know, reflecting on who I was through all those periods, all our incarnations, you know, from childhood. And I think in the book I kind of did to speak it with the voice that I was then, you know, the foolish child that I was then, the intense child, but the longing and all of that, through the teenage time, through the young bride who didn't know how to do anything. You know, that voice, we all have that person in us. You know, it's a mistake to think we leave that person behind. You have your 7-year-old self. You're protecting her, but she's there, you know, and I have mine. And we have our 17-year-old selves, though we might not want to remember that one so much. But we have those selves. It's not that we build on it, but if you build aside from it, then you aren't building on truth. You're not building on your moral center, assuming you were there at 7, and we all are at 7. So it was really important for me, I think, at that time to be writing that book and to be remembering, you know, all the things that can't be taken away. And I said in the book that, you know, that I discovered it is by that which cannot be taken away that we can measure ourselves.
And you kept some things in a magic box.
I have a little box. I still have it of things that are very, very special that I've kept since childhood.
Can you give us some examples of special things?
Well, they wouldn't seem special to anyone but me. Some doll's eyes, one dice that won a lucky thing for me, a little medal that I got in school, one for gymnastics and one for acting, little pieces of a wallet, of a gold-covered wallet. I don't know if it's real gold, that Salvador Dali gave me.
Oh, wow.
And he said I would never be poor if I had this this little piece of gold. I don't think it's real gold. It's like a waffly piece of paper, but I have it. A scapular. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a Catholic. It's a cloth thing. A relic. You know, the Catholics are big on bones. You know, they love to keep pieces of people, which is an odd thing. But so I have these relics. I have a collection of, you know, my children's teeth, you know, I you know, that the fairy took, and I just have a lot of little notes that my dad and my mom left for me. It's a collection of meaningful things, bits of poetry.
One of the things we learn about you in the book is that you contracted polio when you were 9 years old. What impact did that have on you emotionally, spiritually?
I think it had a huge impact on me, bigger than I thought at the time, which was seismic at the time, in that it took me out of my life, which was a beautiful one in Beverly Hills, California, which I describe in the book. I mean, it really was an idyllic existence in our garden and my beautiful mother and all of the things that you never think about, but which surrounded me. And suddenly I was in the public wards for contagious diseases in downtown LA, where I'd never been in my life, taken from my parents, and not certain that I would ever return. And if I did return, what kind of shape would I be in? And it was a time of terror of polio. And so the people treating us were terrified of us. You know, they dressed, you know, protectively and had minimal contact with us, and the wards were full. It was epidemic time. And it was odd that I got polio, you know, because, I mean, it was Beverly Hills, and we already knew not to go to the movies or swim in public swimming pools or any of those things. It was that time of epidemics. But we had our own screening room, we had our own swimming pool. I don't know how I got polio. But the other dread was that if I lived, and even if I didn't, that I had given it to everybody else.
Oh,
you know,
of
and
course.
that's a horrible, horrible burden to contemplate.
Oh, absolutely.
So when I came home, all my family had moved to we had a beach house, and my mom was gone. And I thought people were lying to me, that I thought I had killed them all. And maybe everybody in my school that was close to me that I really cared about. I didn't know because I didn't go to back to school for almost a year. And, and people were afraid of me. But I think that the positive things that I drew from that experience were immeasurably valuable. That things can't. You can give things, but they can't really be taken. That ownership comes in the moment of giving. Like I can own something in the moment I give it to you. Otherwise, I'm simply hoarding it until the day I die. But in the moment of giving is the moment of ownership. But I discovered, that you can survive. You can, if you have you can build another life. I discovered, but I was trying to say about survival that it seems like the will to survive was really important to me, and I'm not sure that I ever would have died anyway. But I was so determined not to be paralyzed. I was so determined to survive, and I forged real friendships in that setting. And I think by discovering what was really meaningful to me, it helped me with the rest of my life. And a huge dose of survivor guilt that I left those wards and a lot of people didn't. And I left them able to walk again, and a lot of people didn't. So what do I do with that? And that really, prompted my quest to try to justify being alive, And so that self never left me, that I knew I had to find a life that could be meaningful to other people, that I survived for some reason and a lot of people didn't. And living in that kind of fear, too, was alien to me. That land of fear and pain and death and being maimed, and your worst. As a kid, the word polio just struck fear in your heart. So that had come to me, was just terrifying. So there were a lot of things that remain with me, and a lot of things that that are really valuable about giving back, and about that you can't. The things of real value can't be taken from you. You can give them, or you can surrender them. You can let go of them. You can turn away from them, but they can't be wrenched from you at all. And I saw that you can build a new life, and even a better one.
Nicely said. Did you always know you wanted to be an actress?
Not at all. No, I didn't at all. I wanted to be a lot of things that only boys could be at first. Firemen. Back in the day, girls couldn't be hardly anything. If I wanted to be a pilot, if I wanted to be a soldier, if I wanted to be, those things were not open. Even to join the Little League, they let me be the water boy, but I just, even in Beverly Hills, you sensed it wasn't as good to be a girl, and that sucked.
Yeah, it
I
does.
really,
Yeah.
Well, can I be a rodeo rider then? I wanted to be Superman, and I wanted to be Dick Tracy, and I wanted to be. There just weren't enough female heroines who were doing the cool things that. Why can't I be a cowboy? I can be the Lone Ranger, and I prayed to be a boy. Until I fell in love. Which is, you've read the book now. My first love was, fictional, but that's okay. It was James Agee.
Yes.
And somebody at school said, they figured out I was talking about Jamie this and Jamie that, and somebody said, when I gave his last name, and after a time somebody said, my mom says he's dead. And I just screamed at her, so what? So I fell in love with James Agee even though he was dead. And later I found out he had a wife named Mia.
Oh, isn't it incredible?
I know he would have loved me, and I would have loved him.
It would have been perfect.
It would have been ideal.
We're showing a clip right now from Rosemary's Baby. Of all the roles you've played, which one is closest to your heart?
Well, that one, for many reasons, but because it was the first great role that I was ever given, and the best role that I was ever given, and it demanded so much of me. And it was, how time takes longer when you're young. It seemed that I was working on that film for like 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
you know, a whole school term,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and the friendships, and I mean every scene. So it was intense, and because it took a lot, it also gave a lot, and I loved making it, and I discovered that I could do those things, which I had never been asked to do, you know, as an actor. So that really broke the wall for me in terms of what I felt I could do, and it also gave me some respect in my own profession, which of course is meaningful. And it also, I think the reason I'm asked to act now is because of that film. Even though I don't want to act now, I'm not acting now, but people remember that film, and I think you're lucky if you have one film in your life, you know, that
Yes.
that gets remembered. You see whole careers of people that we can't even remember a single film they were in.
We were talking earlier about family and the influence of family. When did you begin to realize that family was more than a matter of shared DNA? You've been mother to 15 children.
Yeah, that it was not at all about the DNA, because if you have a family with adopted children, the bloodlines are meaningless. You know, it's got to be about the love and the commitment, of course. And it is in all families, but I think people have this idea that, you know, you're my own flesh and blood, therefore I blah, blah, blah. That doesn't fly with me, you know, in our family at all. How could it? So we would never say those words, we would never think those thoughts, and we never believe that. It's about love and about commitment.
And now for the last several years, you've been an advocate for children around the world. I wonder if you might speak to what you call the obscenity of hunger.
Well, that in this world there is plenty of food, and even there's plenty of money if the very, very wealthy would share more. If we could all just share more and get along. I mean, and the fact that children are starving to death, and it's the children, especially the little ones under 5, that go first when in a situation of hunger. And I've seen too much of it. And it is obscene when we have so much, you know. And I don't say there isn't hunger in this country. I know there is, but we do have nets for people. You don't generally hear of children starving to death here. There are things you can plug into so that your child doesn't starve to death. But there isn't that in other countries. You know, I would just like to see. You know, I think Bill Gates is doing a great job with his money, with a tremendous conscience in terms of wiping out certain diseases. He's focused on several really important things, polio being among them, malaria being another, but also scholarships. The answer is, I mean, how can we have a country that endures when only one branch is flourishing on the tree and the other branches are withering? When we saw the young woman speaking at the Trayvon Martin trial, I don't know if you saw the young lady he was on the phone with, and people, you know, were less than kind about the way she spoke or the fact that she couldn't read the documents offered to her. And I said, we should be taking this as a sign of this lovely young woman is not getting the education and probably the health care that she deserves, because we've fixed things in some way that our schools are not good enough, and we're not taking care of the young Americans. So what does the future of America look like? And who's having more than 2 children? It's not the educated people. It's the people who, you know, are less educated, have less money, and fall more on the resources of the country. So everybody loses. So I just think if we pitched in our country to build up our educational system so no one even thinks of private schools, that all schools should be as good as a private school, and education should be free for everyone right through college, or nearly, at least affordable. Otherwise, some of our kids aren't getting to go to college, and high school is so dangerous and so loose, and our teachers are not able to deal with it. Our kids aren't getting the education we need to sustain a country.
We just have a couple of minutes left, and I've got to ask you, as a Goodwill Ambassador for UNICEF,
Yes.
what are your top priorities?
At my request at UNICEF, I asked to be their ambassador focused on children caught in conflict. Because those, in my experience, are the children that need it most. That when there's conflict, all of the problems of that area are exacerbated times a million. That people who had once had a plot of land, say a little garden, no longer have access to that land, driven from their homes, their lands. Not only do they not go to school and they're living in terror, but these are the children that starve to death and contract diseases, living in deplorable refugee camps and moving constantly. So, you know, those are the children that I think are we've heard a lot about the children of Syria in these last few years, and rightly. It's awful. And there is an obscenity, you know, that to all of it. We wouldn't go, I already went into too much politics, but isn't it obscene that, you know, 10,000 plus children have been killed outright in Syria, and we don't even know how many are dying in Darfur, in Congo, in Central African Republic, because adults can't settle their problems, you know, in a rational way. And I think we just have to conclude that this is what human beings are. We're not very admirable in terms of solving our problems, you know, and we're a violent species, and we kill our own. But the children aren't part of this, and so, you know, my heart goes out to them, and I travel wherever UNICEF invites me into those areas of conflict.
Mia, it's been so wonderful having you with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.